In November 2012, from the shores of Mexico, a small fishing boat quietly slipped into the Pacific. Two men were aboard: José Salvador Alvarenga, a fisherman who had spent half his life on the ocean, and Ezequiel Córdoba, a quiet, religious man, new to the sea. Their mission was simple: a short fishing trip, a few days at most, catching shark and marlin to sell back on land. They brought food, water, fuel, and faith. José knew these waters. He had done this before. Nothing could go wrong. But fate had other plans. A storm rolled in, unpredicted, brutal. Waves tore at their boat, winds howled through their gear. The motor died. The GPS broke. And in the chaos, the ocean took control. They didn't return that night. Or the next. They had disappeared, swallowed by silence and sea. And no one was coming. The storm lasted 5 days. 5 days of roaring wind, pounding waves, and endless darkness. By the end of it, the boat had drifted hundreds of miles from shore. The shore was gone. The radio? Dead. The GPS? Gone. The motor? Completely useless. They were now floating, alone, in one of the largest bodies of water on Earth. Food began to run low. The fresh water they had brought was nearly gone. José and Ezequiel started rationing. 1 sip. 1 bite. Per day. José tried to stay calm. He had faced danger at sea before, but nothing like this. They began eating raw fish when they could catch them with their hands or makeshift nets. But some days, there was nothing. They watched the sun rise. And set. Then rise again. No ships. No planes. Just water. Every hour that passed made one thing clear. They were completely adrift, and no one was coming. They didn't know it yet, but this wasn't going to be a matter of days. It would be months. Then years. And the ocean was only getting started. After the storm passed, a strange calm settled over the ocean. No land in sight. No rescue. Just the sound of water slapping against the boat. But then, something moved beneath the surface. A shadow. Slow, massive. Then another. Sea turtles. For José, this was more than a sign of life, it was survival. He remembered stories. Old fisherman tales. That turtle blood could hydrate. That the meat could last for days. And now, with their supplies gone and no rain in sight, it was time to hunt. With bare hands, ropes, and sharp instinct, he dove in. Catching a sea turtle in open water is nearly impossible. But desperation makes a man relentless. Eventually, they caught one. José apologized out loud before killing it. It wasn't for sport. It was life or death. The blood quenched their thirst. The meat gave them strength. The shell, they saved for tools. This wasn't a victory. It was survival. A fight against nature, with nothing but instinct and courage. From that moment on, turtles became sacred. Not just food, salvation. But the ocean wouldn't always be so generous. Rain. After weeks of salt, it was finally raining. For most people, rain is a nuisance. For José and Marquez, it was salvation from death. They had run out of fresh water days ago. Their lips cracked, their tongues dry like sand. Hallucinations had started. One of them even tried drinking seawater, a mistake that nearly cost his life. But now the sky opened. They scrambled to catch it. Anything that could hold water, a tarp, an old boot, even their hands. They laughed. They cried. They drank slowly, as if afraid it was just a dream. That day, they learned a new rhythm of survival. Catch every drop. Store every drop. Because the ocean gives, but it also takes. The rain became their calendar. Sometimes it came every few days. Sometimes not for weeks. They learned to read the clouds like prophets. To taste the wind. To listen to the silence before the storm. Because out there, water is life. And the sky? The only faucet they had left. At first, they couldn't believe it. A shadow under the boat. A flipper. Then a head. A sea turtle, slow, majestic, and edible. It wasn't just a blessing. It was protein. They had been surviving on rainwater and tiny scraps of fish. But their bodies were shrinking. Bones pressed through skin. Muscles disappeared. Hunger wasn't a feeling anymore, it was the constant background noise of existence. The first turtle was the hardest. It looked at them with big, ancient eyes. But this wasn't a nature documentary. It was survival. They killed it with a knife tied to a stick. A brutal act. But necessary. They ate everything, the meat, the fat, even parts of the organs. Raw, sometimes. Cooked on a piece of metal when they had fire. And then they prayed. For forgiveness. For strength. For another turtle. Weeks passed between sightings. Sometimes nothing came. Sometimes only jellyfish or floating trash. But when a turtle did appear, it meant life for another week. It became their ritual. Their most sacred act. Not hunting. But surviving. For days, the sky was cruel. Endless blue. Not a cloud in sight. Their lips cracked. Tongues swelled. They spoke less, moved slower, dreamed of rain. Then, a whisper. The wind shifted. Dark clouds rolled in like a forgotten army. And then, it came. Rain. It didn't fall, it crashed. A million silver bullets exploding on the surface of the ocean. They screamed with joy. Cupped their hands. Lifted their faces to the sky. Anything that could hold water, plastic bottles, an old boot, even a torn tarp, became a holy vessel. For a moment, the boat wasn't a prison. It was a sanctuary. They drank greedily. Rainwater, clean, cold, perfect. Some cried. Some prayed. All lived another week. But rain was rare. It came uninvited, stayed too short, and left them begging for more. Still, every drop counted. Every storm was a miracle. Food was always the enemy. Or rather, the lack of it. Fish were scarce. Seaweed? Inedible. And then, turtles appeared. Massive, slow-moving, ancient. They floated near the boat like ghosts. At first, the men were in awe. Then, they were desperate. They didn't hunt them out of cruelty. They did it because their hands trembled from starvation. Catching a turtle wasn't easy. They had to be quick, coordinated, brutal. The first kill was silent. No celebration. No joy. Just survival. They drank the blood for hydration. A strange, salty warmth in their throats. The meat, raw, chewy, hard to swallow. But it kept them alive. They saved bones to use as tools. Shells as bowls. Nothing was wasted. Every turtle meant a few more days. They gave them names. Not out of affection, but to remember the cost. Each one a sacrifice. The ocean provided. But only when it felt like it. And every gift had a price. The final days felt like years. A storm hit. The biggest one yet. Waves slammed into the boat like fists. They held on, barely. The sky turned black. Rain poured like judgment. Lightning lit the faces of men who no longer feared death. They were too tired to care. And then, out of the chaos, a sound. Distant. Mechanical. A helicopter. At first, they thought it was a dream. Just another cruel trick from the mind. But it grew louder. Closer. Then, a spotlight. Screaming voices in Spanish. Lifebuoys dropping. Rescue. At last. 600 days. 600 nights. A floating grave turned into a miracle. When they reached land, they couldn't walk. Their bodies were bones. But their eyes, alive. Wilder. Wiser. Reporters flooded in. Everyone wanted the story. But the men, they stayed mostly silent. What do you say after surviving the impossible? They returned to a world that had moved on. But they had changed. Forever. Not heroes. Not victims. Just survivors.